Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 22 of Elevate Your Craft, the podcast. Today's episode is going to focus on, or act as a companion piece to the 50 consecutive double unders video that I previously released. And this particular challenge is something I set up for myself probably a few months or so after I really started taking jump rope seriously. At the time, I could barely pull off 10 double unders that weren't even consecutive, so I challenged myself that one day I'd be able to do 50 in a row. And it's been quite an accomplishment for me now that I've done it, and I definitely want to share some tips on how to achieve it yourself. And so what I want to do is talk about the approach I took and offer some insight into the things that I picked up along the way that could potentially help you in your journey. And they'll revolve around three main factors that are important to consider when working your way toward achieving 50 consecutive double unders. And they are developing anaerobic conditioning, technique, and understanding how your rope can affect performance. So without going too deep into the science of it all, the double under in this case is an anaerobic movement because it draws in the energy systems that are without oxygen. And they are characterized by short bursts of intense activity that train speed, power, and agility. And depending on the energy system, this activity can last up to 30 seconds of intense exercise or about 2 to 3 minutes of moderate to intense exercise. So knowing this, it's important to tailor the training you do to develop your anaerobic conditioning. And the approach that I took in developing this anaerobic base was working in intervals of 10 consecutive reps of double unders. Once I could achieve 10 reps, then I would focus on completing 20, then 30, and so on until I hit 50. Initially, I wasn't able to complete the necessary reps consecutively, so I would just use single jumps in between until I was able to perform the required number of double unders. So, for example, if I was working on achieving 10 repetitions, I would do as many as I could consecutively. So say I did 4 as an example. Then I would maintain single jumps and intersperse the remaining 6 throughout, even if they weren't consecutive. Now, that being said, I would always try and do more than one at a time if I was able. And over time, you'll begin to string more and more of them together and be able to move on to the next goal. And that was about as much structure as I introduced when training for this particular goal. And when looking at recovery periods, I generally kept them at about a minute. A good baseline to follow is a 1-to-1 ratio of activity and rest. So, for example, if your sets are 30 seconds each, you'll want to rest for the same amount of time. If you require more rest, there's certainly no harm in that. Just listen to your body and do the best that you can. There are many methods you can use to develop anaerobic conditioning, but the common theme is keeping the workouts shorter and increasing the intensity. And this is also known as high-intensity interval training, or HIIT. But use it to your advantage, and you'll be well on your way to 50 consecutive double unders. The next topic I want to get into is technique. And this is very important because you want to make your movements as efficient as possible in order to maximize your endurance. Without proper technique, you are constantly compensating for inefficient movement, which will sap your energy. And I discussed technique in episode number 14 of the podcast, so be sure to check it out for further insight. But to recap some key aspects, you want to be sure that you're jumping on the balls of the feet. You want to keep the body and head upright while staring straight ahead. Maintain slight flexion in the knees, which helps absorb impact when landing. You want to rotate the rope using the wrists. And one thing you really want to notice throughout your training is that as you practice more and more, you develop a keen sense of where the body is in time and space. You get a feel for where you are in relation to the rope, so proprioception, and really learn to control your jumps. And then finally, ideally, you don't want to jump more than an inch off the ground. And all of these things you want to have down with single jumps before you begin to train for double unders and consecutive double unders. And one thing to note regarding that last point on technique is the double under is a power jump. So you'll be jumping higher than 1 inch off the ground. It's just these are things you want to strive for first in single jumps. and then master technique, and then move on to the double unders. So keep in mind, the double under is a power jump, so don't be too concerned about how high you're jumping off the ground. Just keep in mind that the higher you jump, the more energy you're using. But as you improve, you can use your increased speed and explosiveness to try and reduce that height. Referring back to what I said before about efficiency, you want to have technique down so you're keeping the double unders as efficient as possible. As you get further into the workout and more tired, it's likely that technique will suffer slightly and the rope will catch more often. So having a solid foundation of endurance and proper technique will allow you to maximize each set. And one of the things that I do very often is jump in front of a mirror so I can keep an eye on my technique at all times. It also helps drill you on keeping the head straight up and looking forward, which can sometimes be difficult to do, especially at the beginning. And keeping an eye on your technique during sets will help you notice any adjustments that you can make in order to improve your technique. A couple things that I noticed with my technique throughout training was that I kept my right hand slightly lower than my left, which was changing the way the rope swung. So I was getting a lot of catches on my left foot. Also, I tended to look down as opposed to staring straight ahead, which caused me to lean forward slightly, and it also reduced my focus. And once I noticed these things, I was able to use the mirror to correct these flaws and reinforce the corrections when I fell back into old habits. Hopefully this gives you some food for thought regarding your technique. When attempting 50 consecutive double unders, or any number of them for that matter, you want to be able to maintain that proper technique because it will really maximize the efficiency of your movements and therefore your endurance. The final topic for today is how the rope you use will affect your performance. My goal here is not to discuss all the different types of ropes. I'll save that for another time, but the ones that are most conducive to achieving multiple consecutive double unders. Overall, you have ropes that are meant for developing speed, agility, and quick timing. And these are lighter, more flexible, and have minimal drag through the air. They're usually made of a PVC or a cable rod. On the other hand, you have ropes that are meant to condition the upper body while jumping. So they're heavier and much slower. And these ropes can be made of cotton, leather, or even use weighted handles. The rope that I use in the video is the Buddy Lee Aerospeed model. It uses a short handle and a swivel bearing system with a PVC rope. So this type of rope is built for speed, so it's a great choice when attempting multiple double unders. You can do very well, though, with a standard PVC plastic-handled rope that we've all come across at some point in our lives. The main thing is you want the rope to be light and allow for minimal friction through the air. And this will allow you to focus on your technique and energy conservation and not have to compensate for the friction and weight of heavier ropes. And while it's certainly possible to achieve multiple consistent double unders using heavier ropes, it will likely just make it more difficult than necessary and in turn more frustrating, especially in the initial stages. Furthermore, heavy ropes really aren't conducive to developing speed and quickness of the hands and feet. And one last thing that's important to consider is the length of the rope. If you find that you're catching a lot or you have to jump quite high in order to even get over the rope, its length might be an issue. I go over how to figure out the right length for you in episode number 14 of the podcast, so I encourage you to check that out. All right, guys. Well, I hope that gives you some helpful insight into achieving multiple consecutive double unders. And my next goal is to do 100 of them in a row, and I'll be sure to let you know when that happens. Keep in mind, 50 ultimately is an arbitrary number, and my hope is that this episode helps you reach even your first double under. It's all about constant improvement at a pace that works for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, and be sure to follow on Twitter. The handle is at EYC Kaz, EYCKAS. The Facebook page is Elevate Your Craft, all one word. The YouTube channel is the same at Elevate Your Craft, all one word. And you can also find the podcast on iTunes under Elevate Your Craft, all one word. Be sure to check out the website, which is www.elevateyourcraft.net. You can catch the video on the Facebook page as well as YouTube and, of course, the website. So that's it for this episode, and I'll catch you next time.